Oh, we're right on. Welcome to Bountiful City Council meeting. This is Tuesday, October 16th, 2021. At 5:30, we had a work session, which is the public's always welcome to be part of us. And this is the 7 p.m. regular session, and we have all of our city council here, and I'll let them say their names for the record, please. And we'll start down there with you, Kate.
Kate Bradshaw.
Chris Simonson.
Kendall Harris.
Randy Lewis.
Millie Segura Bar.
Richard Higginson.
Thank
For the
you.
record.
Thank you. And again, we recognize Richard here, difficult circumstances in that his father passed away suddenly, and we're all saddened by the difficulty that must and certainly is for a very large family that loves each other. And we're for the record, Richard, we're with you.
Thanks,
and
Mayor.
your family.
That's very kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot to say thanks to the city staff for being with us. Thank you all as well. And then to all of you who have attended tonight, we're very pleased that you have taken the time out of busy schedules to be with us. We will start tonight by having a Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to ask our former council member to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and that's Beth Holbrook, who is a commissioner with the UTA. There's only three commissioners, and she's one of them, so we're very proud of her. Please, thanks.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Beth. That was on the moment. But also, so we have past city officials, and so we've asked Joe Johnson, who is our very past mayor of Bountiful for 12 years, and he's going to offer a word of prayer for us, please.
Our dear Heavenly Father, as we bow our heads before Thee tonight, we wish to express our deep gratitude for the city we live in and for the people that we're around. We're grateful for those who serve. And Father, we're thankful to be in a country that is free. We recognize the freedoms that we have, and we're so grateful for them. We pray tonight a special blessing to be with the Higginson family and Rich. We loved his dad. And we love the Higginson family, and we pray that bless them in this sorrowful time, and yet rejoicing with the great Father. Now, Father, we pray that citizens of Bountiful that will take time to find those in need, that we'll lift those and strengthen those that need help. We pray also that we'll find ways to be less contentious and more helpful and kind. We love Thee, and we express again our gratitude to Thee for all that we enjoy and have. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And thank you, Beth. Each and every city council meeting, we have a public comment time of 10 minutes. And we certainly are happy to have you come up and take 2 minutes. There's a little buzzer here, and we'll do that for the next 10 minutes. I might remind you, though, that we do have a public hearing tonight, and if you're here for the public hearing, you'll get a chance to say things at the public hearing. And you can see what that has to do with the land use code in Bountiful, accessory dwelling units. If you want to wait until then, if that's your item. Otherwise, you're welcome to come. Please give your name and your address.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm Jay Holt, Holt as in Tom, at 132 Sterling Drive, Bountiful.
been a resident for 57 years in my first meeting. So it's been a long time, but I finally retired.
Welcome.
Thanks. I finally retired, and now I have time to maybe give some input. And so I'm real on the bandwagon for the fiber network. And we were going back and forth on Facebook the other night. I was a little bit disappointed that the council hired a consultant, because my brother and I hired 3 or 4 of them before we realized they don't know any more than we do. And we've got the answers that they're just giving us. We just had them in a different order. So, but that's been said. In my opinion, there's 3 phone calls that need to be made. One to Provo City, because they tried to do it their own fiber, Provo, Orem, Murray City, and you'd have your answers of which way to go. And that's, I do not want to mention names because I don't want to get sued by the big guys, but utopia is the only way for this city to go. I feel the city's a bit 24 years behind the times with the infrastructure, and we need to get moving. The other comment I have is that Bountiful Power has not maintained street lighting properly. Orem is on their 3rd round of street lighting improvements with LED. They tried induction lighting and so forth, and it's time that the city step up and get the street lighting corrected. And those are my comments. I'm happy to help in any way I can with, because I purchased for 46 years material for infrastructure, for electrical, fiber, utility, on and on. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Holt. Next, please. Welcome.
Brian Potts, 181 West, 100 North. I am also chair of the Bountiful Community Council, and I would like to publicly thank Gary Hill and Shauna Andrus for getting our council on the city webpage. We're under the community tab, thanks to their support, and we appreciate that. And just kind of getting our message out to the residents of Bountiful that we have a community council. We're looking for volunteers, for people that want to help serve the residents. So we're grateful for that service to us, and I think that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Potts. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hansen, and I live by the Bountiful Rec Center. And my condolences to you, Richard, and your family. I would like to, almost a month late, I believe, but say something about the last meeting for the Washington Park. The meeting was to talk about and decide on which A, B, or C design that we were wanting. And it kind of turned out to be a meeting against the pickles and the skaters. It was very interesting. If you missed it, it was exuberant. What I wanted to say, I know and understand why 20-some years ago the skate park was dismissed abruptly, what happened. But I also would like to say what happened at this last meeting. Many people from 6 years up were there with their skateboards or a cardboard cutout. Very well behaved, very well mannered, quiet, reserved, spoke to when they were asked or raised their hand. A couple of the other people, a man said he was 60 plus and could drive anywhere, but there wasn't enough pickle courts, and was very, in my opinion, obnoxious. And another person who was very, I think, rude to the skaters was someone that lived near the school, and didn't like people parking in her driveway or in front of her house. Obviously, I'm for the skate park. That was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I don't skate.
We're glad to have an advocate. So, anyone else? You're looking around, Richard, like you're wanting to get up there. Oh, you're okay? All right. Well, listen, if there's not anyone else standing up, then we'll close this comment period. Appreciate those who were good enough to come up and be brave and speak their piece. Thank you. We'll look for we will consider approval of the minutes of the previous meetings held on September 28th and October 12th. And Kate, I think you have indicated that maybe you have a correction or addition.
Yes, on page 5 of the minutes, line 38, it's page 27 of the packet, but page 5 of 6 of the minutes, line 38. It starts Councilwoman Bradshaw Harris, and though I don't oppose hyphenated names in any way, shape, or form, it looks like we probably need to delete Harris from my last name and just leave it Bradshaw.
Okay. Any other corrections or additions from the council? If not, I will look for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. And a-
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, we will look to have council reports. Let's start down there with you, Richard.
Happy to have a brief report, Mayor.
Okay.
We had a meeting with Magellan, the advisory company on our fiber internet interest. And I'm not going to intentionally contradict anything that Mr. Holt said today, but I was really impressed with Magellan and the depth of their experience in bringing fiber to communities, the incredible investment total that they've shepherded through the process, and both of the representatives who met with us, their knowledge and experience on things. Honestly, it was very comforting. So Alan West, I believe, is going to, say again? I said that's good to hear. Absolutely. Now, it seriously was really comforting in this process, because as we've expressed several times, we don't know yet, a lot of us, what we don't know. And so these guys have the experience that we need in order to help us along the way. Additionally, if I may, I want to reference one of the companies out there that made the top 4 in our selection process that advocates micro-trenching. I mean, our streetlight issue is specifically because we have used micro-trenching in the past. And rectifying that situation now is a project that's ongoing, and it's the right thing for Bountiful to do, and it's not the right thing for us to try to solve our fiber problem by making that same mistake, in my opinion. Anyway, Magellan's going to be a great partner. Alan West is going to be compiling, if he hasn't already emailed it, I haven't checked email for a couple of days, I'll be honest. But he's going to be compiling some of the questions that were asked by the committee, the answers provided by Magellan, just some great information that should be coming to you very shortly in an email. So look for that. I think that the other members of the committee that are here would agree it was a great meeting, don't you think? Anyway.
Is it okay for me to comment?
The mayor would be the
Go
decider.
ahead.
There's a lot of expertise of citizens in the city that have experienced both the citizens that we're talking about.
Indeed.
Some of their input should probably be put with Magellan's suggestions and to come up with the right solution. Because from what I've seen on the Bountiful Fiber Facebook thing, is there's several citizens that have some good knowledge, past experience.
Great.
Years and years of it, so.
We appreciate that. Did you have a comment, Kendallin?
If you don't mind, I just wanted to ask Richard.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that in that meeting you had and that the information that's coming from Alan West, we will be hearing more about the time frame. Was that talked about a little bit? Or-
Yeah. It's going to be shorter probably than they had initially calculated,
Nice.
but, which is great for us. It'd be great if we were ready to hit the ground running when our construction moratorium period ends. So at least with some decision and design and whatever. So, yeah, that's part of the information that should be coming.
Thank you.
So, and Gary, I don't know a time frame. Is Alan here? Yes. There you are, you handsome guy.
Yep. Good.
Talking about 4.5 months for the process to get the feasibility study done.
So, what was your impression of him, Alan?
They were
Perfect.
For those who don't know, Alan West is our Director of IT here
Yeah.
in Bountiful.
Yeah,
Just so
good. Good info.
we often don't do this, but let me ask you something, Richard.
Please.
So with that micro trenching, does this have anything to do with the large project we had, I think it was 3100 South, that we've just experienced with electrical lines up there? No?
Micro-trenching of our streetlights through most of this.
Alan, it might be helpful if you, I was going to grab Alan too and just let you know so that people online can hear.
Sorry, I'm letting us get out of hand because of me, but go ahead.
I apologize, and plus I don't talk very loud, so. No, the micro-trenching that Councilman Higgins talking about was 40, 45 years ago when most of the streetlights were put in through the city. They came in with what they called a frost wheel, and it was a big wheel, it just dug through the asphalt. They trenched the wire directly just underneath the asphalt, and then they patched the asphalt. Well, now the wire's failing, but you can still drive along and see the little snake trenches where they haven't had to totally rebuild the roads. So 3100 is rebuilding the main big overhead line, but it's the street lights where we come in with the boring, where they're actually now boring down underneath and putting a conduit in it. So we're rectifying the micro trenching that we did 40-plus years ago.
Okay,
Sorry,
well, good.
thank
We have an answer.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So one other thing, if I could, Mayor, under a different hat, last month, I think it was last month, the council, maybe it was just earlier this month, the council was presented the idea of a One Utah Mutual Assistance Agreement for our power department, where Rocky Mountain Power, as well as municipal power companies and some of the rural associations would have a mutual aid agreement. And Alan reported back to the Power Commission this morning that a lot of our sister cities who have their own power department, evidently based on past poor experience with not getting help from the large corporation, have declined to sign that agreement. And I just wanted to encourage the council that rather than base any decision that we have on hurt feelings from the past or lack of cooperation from the past, look at this as a great opportunity for us to take advantage of creating a better future and a better cooperative future. So that's only going to aid us. I mean, there's no reason for us to avoid the benefit to try to somehow redress past grievances. So as we look at this, look at it as an opportunity to fix a relationship that hasn't been great. And going forward, I think it'll benefit all of us and all the people in the state. So that's all I have. It's long. I apologize for that.
No,
what
that's
I
great.
thought.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
Millie?
Well, I don't have anything quite as interesting as fiber, but I think it's pretty interesting. Our youth council won't be here to report tonight because most of our members are being inducted into the National Honor Society. And so we're really excited for them and congratulate them on that recognition. But they had a fantastic service project and event for the children of our community. They had a Halloween party, trick-or-treat extravaganza a few weeks ago, and they also received quite a few donations for the food pantry. And so they were really excited about that. And so they're just a great group of youth who are really excited to do service in our community. And so it's really, really been great to work with them. And so hopefully you'll let us know if we need help to help with the Bar J Wranglers concert. So we'll chat about that. So other than that, that is all I have to report this evening.
Thanks, Millie. Kendall?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm the liaison for the Bountiful History Commission, and just a reminder, if you haven't ever been over to the museum, to get over there, and they have tours by appointments. And so if you haven't been to the museum, the Bountiful History Museum, it's a great place to visit.
Maybe Kendall, and tell them where it is. Do you want to do that?
It's just on Main Street, next to Russ and Brothers, just a little bit south of 4th North there.
Thanks, Kendall. Chris?
Mayor, could I take a little bit of my time and have Richard Watson of the Bountiful Service Council come to the mic, please?
You bet.
Thank you for this opportunity. Before I talk about Barjay. I was a pleasant surprise to actually come here and see two of my favorite people, Mayor Joe and Beth, and I know they already left, but it was so nice to see. I haven't seen them forever, so it was really, really fun. And also, I too want to extend my condolences and prayers to Richard and his family. So,
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
so I don't know if you guys have seen the poster, if you've seen the posters over in the by the cashiers. So December 17th, that's a Friday, 7 o'clock, will be the Barjay Wranglers farewell concert. This is their very last concert. Technically, they'll be in Logan the next night, which will be their last concert. But that concert's sold out. So we're expecting probably a sellout. So, because we have advertised in Salt Lake as well. So we'll see. Actually, we hope so, because we really aren't equipped to sell tickets on site. So, so anyway, reserve tickets are going to be $25. Beginning on November 1st, there's 2 places to buy tickets. One will be here in City Hall, where you pay your utility bills, and the other will be online, and you can see the online purchase link on Bountiful City's website, or Music in the Park Facebook page, or get it off the poster. And these are mini posters. I'll leave some on the table for those in the audience. And yes, and Youth Council, yes, we'll need at least six to help usher the crowd. And we'll get with the scanning, and we'll figure that out. So, and I also want to thank, for helping me put this together, Galen Rasmussen, who's not here, but big, huge help putting this together, especially doing the online sales. I'm so grateful that he was able to help. I don't think I could have done that myself. So big, big thanks. So if you can tell Galen thanks, I told him he deserves a big pat in the back, maybe a raise. Can you give him a raise? Okay, all right. So this will be, like I said, farewell concert. I know probably that night I probably will be a little emotional, because I've known these guys now for 12 years, and I've got to know them personally. So this is kind of sad for me to see these guys be going away. So anyway, come support the Barjay. I'm thankful for you guys supporting our concerts, especially this one. So, any questions?
Thanks, Richard.
All right, thank you.
Mayor,
Thanks.
another comment,
Please.
if I
Yes,
could,
please,
please. Thank you, Richard. And the Bountiful City Service Council is wonderful. I've had the opportunity for the last 4 years of sitting with these men, and they do so many things in this community that we don't really fully appreciate. And I think that we really need to, when we see them, thank them for what they do. If I could make one other comment, Mayor, if I could, please. As I have looked over what we want to do at the Washington Park, the trails, the beautifulness of this city, this past week, the number of veterans that have come to my home have really touched me. On November the 3rd, we're placing another wall with names of veterans, plus we'll be adding more pavers that families have donated to the Bountiful Veterans Park. On November the 11th at 11 o'clock, the Bountiful Veterans Park, we're going to place a wreath honoring all those men, women, and families that have given so much that we might have this opportunity to have parks and trails and where we live. When you see and have an opportunity to thank a veteran, this next month, please do. We've had 2 elementary schools ask if they could come to the Wreath Lane program on November 11th at 11 o'clock to honor those men and women that have served. I just want to thank the city, the council, staff for giving the Bountiful Veterans Park the opportunity to build this park. The stories are so touching. This piece of ground to the north of this building is sacred ground to many of us. So I thank you. I thank the citizens and everyone to make this possible. And if you're out on November the 11th at 11 o'clock, come and witness this wreath laying ceremony. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Chris. Perfect. Please, Kate.
That's a hard act to follow, Chris. My report is about the walking audit of 500 South and today's follow-up meeting with UDOT and the consultants in UTA and Wasatch Front Regional Council about the future I-15 project. And I mentioned to all of you that I would take some notes and report back. It was fascinating to walk intersections that I have only used via car. It was slightly terrifying to contemplate crossing 5th South under the freeway in an attempt to reach the Front Runner Station on the other side of the freeway. And to contemplate doing that, if walking or biking was my only mode of transport, was eye-opening. So we had some wonderful discussions with the group that attended from West Bountiful, from Bountiful, and from the different agencies that are involved in thinking about what we want to ask, and this is the time to ask broadly for different things that we want in terms of how that corridor serves our community, both in terms of how we access it with our vehicles, how we access it for recreation purposes if you are trying to reach the Legacy Parkway Trail, or if you're somebody who is crossing it for work or school or other purposes. We had lots of discussions today about 2600 South and about 4th North, about Pages Lane, and also about 1500 South. There will be follow-up workshops in April. I urge the community to pay attention for those so that they can give that feedback too. And just to fellow council members, I urge you to all take an opportunity to think about visiting those intersections and getting out of the car and crossing them on foot. And to perhaps think about, yesterday we did it in the rain. It's not, though it often shines in Bountiful, it doesn't always shine in Bountiful. And some of our residents, as they're using public transit, going that last mile to a place to work or to pick up kids, they're doing it sometimes in the snow and sometimes in the rain. And so that was eye-opening to not just do it on foot yesterday, but to also do it in the rain.
Okay. Anything else?
Mayor, could I ask a question?
Please.
Kate, 1500 South that you mentioned. Be more specific. Where?
So going underneath 1500 through
the underpass.
to the underpass. And the reason that was a particular discussion point is for people that are commuting via bike, that's often the preferred way to go, from Bountiful to West Bountiful or Woods Cross, because 500 South is such an intimidating, narrow, interesting experience to do so on foot or on bike, that Pages Lane or 15th South becomes the preferred alternative. When I'm riding a road bike, that is my preferred alternative to get to the Legacy Parkway, even though it's out of my most direct route.
Right.
And so there was some interesting conversations about the way that the I-15 becomes an artificial barrier to our communities, that it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't, want to interact or have good flow from the east and the west side. But that's part of what it became, is perhaps as we're doing, you know, the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks phase of this. The constraints at 500 South and the constraints at 1500 might be slightly different in terms of accommodating bike and foot traffic because they don't feature the on and off ramps of the freeway.
Interesting. Thanks.
With that, we'll go to item number 6. Consider approval of expenditures greater than 1,000 paid September 27th, October 4th, and 11th, 2021, and the August 2021 financial report. Any corrections or additions to those? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second?
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have a resolution here, and it's Chief Beeler. We're glad that you're here. Good to see you. This item's for you.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, the item that I have to bring to you today is a recommendation for the city council to approve an interlocal agreement with Bountiful City and the Davis County School District, and approval of Resolution 2021-21. This interlocal agreement that we're requesting to be entered into will be effective for 5 years. It designates the schools that school resource officers will be provided by Bountiful Police Department, which are Bountiful High, Viewmont High, Bountiful Junior High, Mueller Park Junior High, Mill Creek Junior High, and South Davis Junior High. This agreement outlines the responsibilities of the school district, the city, and the police department. It also discusses how the district will annually compensate the city for school resource services. This agreement closely resembles the previous agreements that we've had with them. Any changes that we deemed more significant were made due to legislative rules regarding the role of a school resource officer. Also, over the last year, we have been given access to closed caption security cameras in our jurisdiction, the schools in our jurisdiction. And because of that, there's an additional section added that include our access to security feed and agreements associated with their use. So with that, I'm requesting your guys' approval to approve that interlocal agreement and the resolution.
I have a question.
Sure.
So can you tell us for officers serving at the schools full-time, are they also engaged in other police duties? How does that work with their timing?
So the only full-time officers we have that are in schools are the high schools, so Viewmont and Bountiful, and that's their major and main responsibility while school's in session. That's part of what the agreement is, because the school district is paying for part of their salaries and costs, that we are responsive to that first. In the summer, of course, they're reintegrated back into our police stuff. The junior highs, that's all part-time. So it's a regular police officer who has a patrol function or detective functions, and they do all of that work on an overtime basis.
Thanks.
You bet.
Question, Mayor?
Please.
Chief, how are these officers selected?
The full-time or the other? Or the
Full-time.
others? The full-time, we basically leave that up to the school. So we try to stay out of it for the most part, administratively or with the supervisors. When there's an opening, we'll let the school know that. They set up the time and they pick their own selection committee. And then we let the officers go over there. We usually have the school resource officer supervisor, which is the detective sergeant, go sit in on those interviews, but he doesn't really participate in it. After the interviews are done, if they have specific questions that would be helpful for them to know, maybe something about their work history type stuff, then he's there and available to be able to answer to that. But I feel that it's important that the school pick their person and that we not give them who we think is the best or who we want them to have. It gives them more ownership in that process. And up till now, it's worked out well. They've picked great people to go over there.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions?
Just a word of support, Mayor. Chief, I love this program. I think it's one of the best uses of our money. And I really appreciate the dedication of the officers that go in and have productive interactions, positive interactions with students as they're coming up, and just help them see that we're all on the same team. So thanks for your work on this.
You bet. I will pass that on to them.
Thanks.
Agree. So I will look for a motion.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the interlocal, is it? No, adopt resolution 2021-21. Yeah, adopting this interlocal agreement on the school resource officers.
Second?
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. We'll turn the next item over to Alan West. Thanks, Alan.
Sorry to put you on the spot there earlier, Alan.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Richard, for your help on the project. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I come before you tonight to request and recommend approval to purchase some primary storage equipment. We've had kind of an unexpected side effect of COVID-19, and it's because of delays in court and the court process. We've had to keep a lot more police body cam and car camera video online in order to be processed in court cases.
Wow.
Usually we can't get rid of them until the court decides whether the case is going to be tried or not, or what the disposition of the case is. So we've realized that we're increasing storage about 1 terabyte a month, and we thought we were going to be good for a longer period of time, but as it is, we recommend the purchase of an HP Nimble storage device that's going to add 21 terabytes to our existing 42 terabytes. And kind of an interesting comparison is the first hard drive that I ever bought was in 1982 that was a 10 megabyte hard drive. And I thought I'd never need any more than that. That can actually hold 2 high definition photos right now. To a comparison, the 42 megabytes, that's 9 million 5 megabyte photos to be stored on there. And it's just amazing because every time we think we're going to have enough, we just need more and we need more. So it's been a very stable and good platform. We already have purchased 2 pieces of the HP Nimble equipment, and we'll just add 1 more shelf to that. Any questions?
If not, I'll look for a motion.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
That was easy. Next item, item number 9, and we'll turn time over to you, Francisco. Is that correct? Yes, Francisco Starka. It's you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a presentation. Any second now. There it is. We got it. Great. This item is the proposed land use code text amendments regarding accessory dwelling units. The staff report starts on page 71, and then we have our proposed ordinance. So we do recommend that you, the city council, review the amendment, hold the public hearing, and approve the proposed ordinance based on the drafted findings as recommended by both staff and the Planning Commission. This was reviewed by the commission during the October 5th, 2021 meeting. I'd like to start out just by simply providing an overview of ADUs. As in the last, yesterday and today, we received a lot of calls. Well, not a lot of calls. We received some calls regarding ADUs and what they really are. And some people are still confused between short-term rentals, bed and breakfast. So I'm just going to start very basic, and then we'll start into the effects of HB 82. This is why we're changing our code now. I'd like to simply start with a basic definition. We amended this a year ago as it had other language that didn't need to be there. A self-contained dwelling unit within an owner-occupied single-family residence or in a detached accessory structure located on an owner-occupied property. By the way, we are recommending to remove the term accessory in-law apartment as it's simply not found anywhere within the code. I think that nowadays people simply, they call them what they are. Most people call them ADUs. A bed and breakfast is not defined in our code. It simply says go to a hotel. Moving forward with the short-term rental, currently our city does not have a definition. So when I get calls on short-term rentals, we say, well, it's not necessarily allowed and it's not necessarily prohibited, as we don't make a distinction between long or short-term rentals. The simple industry definition of a short-term rental or nightly rental is the rental of a dwelling unit or any portion thereof for less than 30 days. If we need to come back to a definition of a dwelling unit, we can. I don't need to spend much time on that. Now I'd like to move forward to give you just a little bit of the history. Before September of 2018, this is what the code allowed for accessory dwelling units. You could only be accommodated, or they could only be used by a relative of yours, only in the single family. It did require a conditional use permit. It did require a deed restriction. It did have the appearance of a single family dwelling. It simply said adequate parking to be provided, not providing a standard. It capped it at 25% of the primary dwelling with the minimum of 350 and 5% of the lot area. So in September of 2018, this is what the city updated. It removed the family provision. It allowed a renter to come in. It amended the parking to simply say, it changed the code to say same requirement as a single-family dwelling. Didn't necessarily provide a specific standard. It increased the area from 25% to 40%, and then the 5 to 10. Those were the changes that the city did in September of 2018. In November of 2020, this was a year ago, this is what we amended. I say we is because this is when I got here in June of 2019. So we clarified the definition, we added the provision regarding parking, and we changed the limitation, the size limitation for internal, or at the time I think we were calling them basement ADUs. We removed that provision from our code and we added a cap for detached ADUs at 1250. That's what we did exactly a year ago. So now, with the effects of HB 82, which was done at this last legislative session, this is what we need to amend. If you look here, I'm following the progression of our code since 2018, and the only things that we need to change based on that HB 82 mandate is that we could no longer have a conditional use permit for internal ADUs, as HB 82 did not address detached accessory dwelling units, only internal ADUs. And it removed the minimum size requirement of 350 that was part of the pre-September of 2018 code. All the other components we were already complying with. So as far as that, I would say that Bountiful was very ahead of some of the other cities throughout the state. And just for the public, HB 82 affected every city within the state. I can spend more time on this, or if you'd like, or we can move on. I want to spend a little bit of time. This is the main portion of HB 82. This is state code. This is not our code. So I want to highlight a few things. I want to highlight how they define internal accessory dwelling unit within a primary dwelling and also within the footprint of a primary dwelling. They define what primary dwelling is. It means a single-family dwelling. I'm in the middle of the page here. And that single-family dwelling has to be detached, and it has to have that same requirement of owner-occupied. Moving on to the next one, the state removed abilities that we had before to establish any restrictions or requirements regarding internal accessory dwelling units. And the last point I want to make here is 3 out of the definition, is that this was supposed to be established for the purpose of offering a long-term rental of 30 consecutive days or longer. So what it's the purpose of it, even though the state didn't provide any specific mandates, were simply to solve the current housing crisis that we have. Moving forward with, actually I want to spend a little bit more time on this. So we looked at our code, specifically addressing item 2 here in front of you. And we have several districts where a single-family dwelling is simply a permitted or an allowed use. So that went beyond the R4, R3, the RF, and the R1 single-family districts, as we had other districts like the RM, which is the multifamily residential district, which also allows or permits a single-family dwelling. So our logic here, as we're amending the code to allow them here, is that if it's good enough for a house, it's good enough for a house with a basement ADU. So what the state did by removing the conditional use permit as interpreted in the, it's now a permitted use on 2A, is that it removed that conditional use permit that we had already established from pre-2018. And the issue with that is that it removed the public hearing process from the internal ADU, and it also removed, in conjunction with that public hearing, is the ability that we had to notify property owners and adjacent to that submitted site through my office, where we would give people a heads up. Hey, an ADU is going to be here. Come ask the city some questions, attend the public hearing. Obviously, if it complies, we move forward and we would approve it. So we no longer have that ability. Again, this only applies for internal ADUs. So now, moving on to the second part of the code, is what the menu that the state gave us that we could provide for or not. So on some of these, I'm going to go fairly quickly. Utility, please.
I'm sorry, just a question. So now if people, after this, if people want to have an ADU in their basement or, an internal ADU, then they still need to come to the planning department?
They do, based on our current recommendation, and we'll get to that slide in just a moment,
Okay.
where the state is, they allow us to either have a permit or a business license. And we'll get to that in just a moment.
Thank you.
So the first one, we're already here, separate utility meter. We don't need to change it. The second one, which is appearance of a primary dwelling, we already had that in our code, no need to change it. Next one is parking. We took care of that in 2020, no need to address that. Next one, cannot have we have the right to decide whether we allow them in a mobile home or not. They're not allowed, so don't need to change that. The next one is, this is the one that you were asking about. So the state code says a municipality may require the owner of a primary dwelling unit to obtain a permit or license for renting an internal accessory dwelling unit. So again, before it was a conditional use permit, the state said it could no longer be a conditional use. It has to be a permitted use. So our recommendation is to move forward with a permit. You submit a permit through my office. We want to be able to keep track of these, and that triggers that we give them a deed restriction that says that you have to go take this paperwork, which says that this is not a duplex. This is a single-family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit. And so when that property owner sells it or it turns over, there's that restriction that's already there, so no one can get any bright ideas to say, oh, I have a duplex. I have 2 units in my house. Does that make sense? So we didn't feel that it was appropriate to get a business license through the renewal process. We're treating this more like a land use application, which is a one and done. It would run with the land. We would have that the deed restriction recorded upon the property, and those same rights would carry on to that next property owner. Does that answer the question you had? Yes. So this is the change that we're doing. For a detached accessory dwelling unit, we are recommending, not to change the code because of the other parameters associated with it. If you recall that accessory dwelling unit, it's an accessory structure, which if it's behind the house, it could be 3 feet from that rear or side property line. So it has greater impacts. The state didn't mandate anything for detached accessory dwelling units, so we want to keep that CUP for that benefit that we have in that we have to hold a public hearing. Moving on to the next one, the state gave us the ability to prohibit this provision in 25% or less of the total area zoned primarily for residential use. We're choosing not to exercise this option. We could revisit this at any time that we would like in the future. So this is a tool that we have, and this is simply our recommendation. We don't need to carve out neighborhoods that would simply go through the other process, which would be the CUP, the conditional use permit. Going on to the next one, septic tanks not allowed, no change requested here from us. Next one, the size limitations, we didn't have a size limitation in attached or internal ADUs, so we do not need to make a change here. We do have a provision for a size limitations for detached accessory dwelling units. So no worries there. Moving on to the next one, short-term rental. So the state code says a municipality may prohibit the rental or offering the rental of an internal accessory dwelling unit for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. So here's the state is saying we choose whether we have short-term rentals in an internal ADU or not. Our recommendation, based on the intent of the state mandate, and I'll remind you what that is, going back to 1A of Section 530, right there in green, an internal accessory dwelling unit means an accessory dwelling unit created for, and now I'm reading the green part, for the purpose of offering a long-term rental of 30 consecutive days or longer. That's the main reason why staff recommends exercising this option of prohibiting short-term rentals within an ADU. Number one is to fall in line with the purpose of the mandate by the state for offering a long-term solution for affordability. And two, it's also a way to mitigate the lack of communication that I don't have with the public anymore. Remember that before this change, it's a conditional use permit. I convene a meeting, I let people know. With the state change, that went away. It was either a permit or a business license. So, and the third reason is that in most short-term rentals, in the most short-term rentals, usually you're renting the whole unit. It's usually not a portion thereof. I understand that I don't have any data to show you on that, but anecdotally, I would say that the majority of short-term rentals are for the entire house, not for a portion thereof. Moving on to the next item, this one is, this is the owner occupied requirement. But it was already mandated, so I think, anyways, we're good on that. This one is good. We need to add some language. The state has given us ability to put liens on properties that are not complying with the regulation, so we'd like to exercise that. And the next one is recorder notice. We already had that, so no change there. And that's what I have. If council wants to move forward and put a sunset clause on the short-term rental prohibition, we're ready to introduce some language if you'd like us to show you. That would be if anybody out there that has a short-term rental, perhaps is going to be occupied in their basement. If it falls under this, we don't want to pull the rug, as we would be moving forward with strict or an instant prohibition of short-term rentals within internal ADUs. So we have some language that we could introduce if you wanted to further expand on that. I see some head nods. I'll show you what we have then, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is 1414-124E6 from the number 6 to the space that is not underlined. That's our current code. I can't find the mouse here. There it is. So this underlined code is what we're currently proposing, which is simply prohibiting short-term rentals from internal accessory units. That's in the proposal. An alternate is to say effective January 1st, or if you talk about any other date, could be 90 days, could be more, we can change the date, and it would still move forward with the short-term rental, but it would give some people, or the ones that have booked ADUs in their, booked short-term rentals in their internal accessory dwelling units, the ability to keep them for now. The third alternative is you may simply say, don't move forward with the short-term rental prohibition, and we simply strike that away from the code, from the proposed code. So with that said, I'll be more than happy to expand on this, on these three alternates, or I could answer any other questions that you have for me. This is a public hearing. This is a legislative item. We have received, you received an email earlier today about 11 a.m. I don't know if Mr. Russell Franson is here. He is not here. He sent us an email. Councilwoman Bradshaw addressed that email. I called them, left them a voicemail, and I also emailed Mr. Franson to answer any questions. This is the only piece of public input that we received in writing, but we do request that you move forward with the land use code text amendments regarding accessory dwelling units. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
I know it seems like there were a few council members who had expressed interest in talking about the pros and cons of short-term rentals. And so I just want to make sure that we have that conversation. And maybe maybe in the end we want to prohibit them, but I just think it's worth at least the discussion. So. And I'm interested, I think the public hearing will also be helpful to hear if there are people who have input on this.
Do you want to have the public hearing first and then reserve that for council discussion time?
Yep. All right. With that, we will open this up to a public hearing and welcome anyone who wishes to come up, and please give your name and address. And that starts now. Thank you.
My last name starts with A, so I guess I'll go first.
There you go.
My name is Ken Aird. I've been a resident of Bountiful for 38 years. I live at 1231 East, 1725 South. I am retired, living on a fixed income, Social Security. My wife and I live on Social Security, and for the last 5 years, we've supplemented our income by renting out a portion of our basement as a short-term rental, primarily through Airbnb. This has allowed us to maintain our lifestyle. If you do enact the ordinance with the short-term provision, it will drastically change our lifestyle to the point with the increased taxes and inflation, we may not be able to stay in our home. So this is a big deal for my wife and me, and I get emotional about it. Just so that you know, over the last 5 years, we've rented on an average of 2 to 3 renters per month, and they have been wonderful people. We have very strict house rules: no smoking, no drinking, no parties, no illegal drugs, and we have had no problems. The people, our neighbors, have been fine with it. We've not had any complaints that I'm aware of, and it's gone very smoothly. One of the benefits of having the short-term rental is we've brought people in from all over the world and introduced them to Bountiful. They come here for a variety of reasons: family reunions, to go to Lagoon for a day or two, to attend a wedding or go to the temple, or simply to see Salt Lake City, and they want to stay in a residential area. There is a need in Bountiful for short-term rentals that isn't being filled any other way. There are no hotels I'm aware of within the city limits. There's nowhere for anyone to stay in Bountiful short-term. if you eliminate short-term rentals. Those people have nowhere to go. If you do decide to include the short-term rental provision, I'm grateful that Francisco has talked about a sunset provision for January 1st. We do have reservations through the end of the year. I feel very badly for those people who want to come and stay in Bountiful if I have to cancel their reservation. So I hope that you will consider that sunset provision he's proposed if you do decide to go through with a short-term provision. From my limited perspective, I see no benefit to eliminating short-term rentals. I do not understand how that would affect long-term affordability of housing. And someday somebody could explain that to me. But in the meantime, I see no benefit, and I see lots of downside. The people that stay with me buy gas and groceries and use the restaurants and the movie theaters here. They bring revenue to the city. Airbnb collects taxes from every one of my renters. And although that tax revenue, I'm sure, is minuscule, it is tax to the city. But more importantly, the businesses and the residents will suffer if those people can't come here, because we send a message that outsiders are not welcome to stay in Bountiful short term. If you don't want to stay for more than 30 days, you're not welcome here, because there's no other way for them to stay here. I appreciate the time you've given me, and I hope you will consider removing the short-term provision. Thank you very
Ken.
much.
Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
Council members. Thank you. My name is Chris Doherty. I am a 42-year resident of Bountiful and here to speak in support of short-term rentals. I have some comments I just want to mostly kind of read, and some are about short-term rentals in specific, and some roll over into long-term rentals. I recently moved from one home to another here in Bountiful. One of the reasons I moved was because because my block became quite full of long-term rentals that were really becoming eyesores and in disregard, being disregarded. We have space, and I should say, did I say I'm at 54 Bountiful Boulevard? We have space in our current home and are now running an SDR in our mother-in-law apartment until we have need for it for one of our mothers. I had to choose either a short-term rental or a long-term rental, and I chose a short-term rental, and the reason I did that is because I have managed 140 units long-term rental before, and found it to be quite a mess in a lot of situations. With a short-term rental, if there's someone who is disrespecting me or my family or my neighbors, my house, my yard, I can say, you're out, you're gone right now. And with a long-term rental, I can't do that. And in fact, it can turn out to be a lengthy battle. I can have a problematic guest out today and have another one in a day or two. And like was mentioned, we're bringing people in who are spending money in our city, money from out of the town, out of state, out of country, and we're turning around and spending this money on contractors and local resources, because unlike long-term rentals, short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, we have to keep our places up because the whole income from them is dependent upon the reviews of guests. And so if they're not good, if the property isn't well kept, if we're not doing a good job, we're not going to get good reviews and we won't get customers. And so we have skin in the game, whereas you look at long-term rentals and a lot of them don't really have skin in the game. They bought the house, they live. My previous neighbor lived in Minnesota, was trying to rent it from there, and had no really concern for the property. And so I think that the short-term rentals are really a much safer alternative to the long-term rentals. So anyways, thank you, Chris Doherty. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, good afternoon, Council. My name is Dustin Seidel, and I live at 3512 South, 100 East, Bountiful, Utah. I am the owner and primary resident of a home to which I conduct short-term rentals in the basement using Airbnb. This home is 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and I purchased it with the sole intent to live alone. The pandemic happened, and I started working from home, which also presented me an opportunity to supplement my income while dealing with a degrading economy and a sizable inflation rate. Please do not confuse me or any of us here with the commercial operators, and contrary to Francisco's assessment earlier, most short-term rentals are not entire homes. I rent the basement to only 4 people, no more than 9 days per stay. My occupancy rate is 14 days per month. It is under the 30-day provision that is being outlined earlier. The income I receive pays occupancy taxes, service fees, a cleaner's living wage, liability insurance, internet and security monitoring services, an accountant. The residence is being used no differently than what was intended for when it was built in 1956. It provides affordable living for myself, tourists, and the surrounding states and countries that visit, and is in itself an economy for which people and entities thrive. My competition sits right behind me, but today we unite in owning a short-term rental is the American dream. In my tenure in short-term renting, I have continually monitored and vehemently addressed any guest that does not abide by my strict rules or the law itself. I have received 0 complaints from neighbors, and the feedback that I have received is that they are extremely happy with me having a rental, as well as the maintenance and care to my home to make it look appealing to my neighborhood and my guests. My neighbors just today stated that they'd be willing to testify that in front of you today, Council. I am by no means a slumlord. Council, I am fully aware that Bountiful City was a big player in HB 82, said earlier this year. And for the most part, I do support it. But I am here today to challenge the provision prohibiting the short-term rentals of 30 days or less for accessory dwelling units brought forth by the Bountiful Planning Commission today. As written from my vantage point, it is government overreach, is fundamentally wrong, and does in no way impact affordable housing crisis HB 82 was intended for, which was to free up the housing market and deregulate accessory dwelling units for long-term rentals. Renting to tourists in no way, shape, or form inhibits long-term renting, as the focus is to accommodate travelers. As is, it punishes the middle class, it reduces economic growth to the city, and places undue financial burden on your constituents. I ask the council today to vote down this provision in favor of a more compromising solution that allows short-term rentals in its entirety in ADUs while addressing what HB 82 actually intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Ron Brown. I live at 33 East, 2750 South. I am a school teacher. I have a fixed income, and I do rent short-term rentals. I introduce people into the community. I give them an opportunity to relocate to Bountiful, and that's what happens a lot of times. We rent out some of the rooms in our basement, okay? And like the other gentleman has stated before, we have strict rules. And if they're not complying and keeping the house neat and clean, they can't stay there. I see no benefit in restricting people staying under 30 days, other than you want to increase my taxes, cost me more, like my property tax that went up this year, and my electricity bill. And so that's why I do short-term rentals, okay? And I'm kind to people. And I like to have them in my home, and I introduce them to coming here. And most of the people, they come, they're tourists, or they are looking for a place to stay, and they can't find any of their place. They have to relocate because of the housing shortage. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Joy Gowns, and I live at 1477 Vineyard Drive. I do not know a single person that does Airbnb that rents the entire home. I don't know one, and I know several Airbnb people. I have done Airbnb with a single room in my home, and the tax dollars, as everybody has already told you, go right back to Bountiful, et cetera. But in talking to the individuals that have come, it is people that are here for an internship, people that are here trying to get into the U of U but cannot get into their housing for an extra week. It is people that are getting a new job in Utah and cannot find a place to rent for another month. Every one of them have been someone I would open my door to a second time. I've never had a neighbor complain about it. I've had children in my home while doing this. My son asks me to do this. He enjoys meeting people throughout the world, and I do not know one derogatory reason that we should stop having the Airbnbs go on in Bountiful. It's helping our community. And you know, I got notice to come to this tonight, and I was just like, Bountiful has a lot of restrictions here. I've loved Bountiful. I've moved away from Bountiful and back over and over again. But to me, if you take this away, you're hurting way more people than you even know. I know I'm standing here for 4 people that are Airbnb people that couldn't come tonight. I have a son that has a residency over on 750 East. He lives alone in that house. That's how he helps subsidize when he has to go away. I have a son living in Texas right now, and he's living in an Airbnb, and that's the only way he can work on his profession, that he goes for a month to each location, or 3 months. It's just a ridiculous thing to take from our city at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Sunderland. I live at 150 East, 1100 South here in Bountiful. I moved here in 1982, and I've lived in the same house since August of 1982. I have 1,550 square feet per floor, and big houses, that's big to me. Warren Buffett's house is the same size. I read an article from him. But they go through a change. The first couple of years you have the house, you need the rental just to pay the payment. And then you have a half a dozen kids, you need the room to live in. And then when you get old and all the kids move away, you need a renter downstairs that when he hears a thump, he comes up and sees if you're all right. I've never had an Airbnb in this house, but every time I travel, I go to Airbnbs because I would rather pay $50 a night in Quebec City than $400 a night. If I pay the $400, I can't afford to go to Quebec City and look around. So it helped me out as a traveler. Now, I don't have an Airbnb, but my very next door neighbor does have one. I support the kid. When I bought my house, it was $85,000, and the interest rate was 17.5%. Now, the government doesn't want to pay a lot of money on interest, so they dropped the interest rate to 0. And now the houses, the banks still need to make them the same amount of money, so the houses are $400,000 instead of $85,000. That kid could not afford that house. if he didn't have the Airbnb. He and his wife sleep in one room and rent the rest out. I think it's a great idea to allow Airbnb. I support the other comments. One thing I would recommend is that counsel people about parking space. I have plenty of parking. Other people need to plan for it before they get one, because what do you do with all the cars? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Deborah Brown. I live at 33 East, 2750 South in Bountiful. I get a little nervous in front of people, but I would respectfully ask, if I can, why now, and what is the motivation for this change? Can I ask that?
Would you like me to answer that, Mayor?
The motivation and the reason.
Yeah, why now? It's a state mandate
Okay.
to permit internal accessory dwelling units. So in other words, we have to. And the why, it's the green purpose that the state indicated. Now, we do have the ability to not exercise that right, and that's what council will decide today.
Okay.
Would you please wait? If you'll wait till they're through and then come up, please. We want you to, remember, write it down, do something.
Good, because I want to remember everything that I was going to ask and comment on. When our children all left our house, we have all these rooms downstairs, and we didn't use them for about 7 years, and then we found out about Airbnb. My husband at that time became a school teacher, and it has helped us tremendously. I don't know if you've ever traveled and used Airbnb yourself, but it's been my experience that Airbnb is extremely supportive of their hosts, and they will take care of issues or problem guests immediately. And I like that. When we decided to do Airbnb, we had to make sure that we were not going to violate parking. And so we put the ordinance right in our listing, and we make sure that everybody understands that they can't park on the street. And we also have a very large driveway, and so we designate spots for people. So we try to do our part, and I know you've already been instructed about Airbnb by many people here, but I want you to know that we respect our guests, we respect this city, and we have not had any complaints either. And in fact, we have quite a lot of people now. It's changed. The type of people who come here are professionals, or they work at the refinery and they need short-term, and they are looking for more affordability. We also have a lot of traveling nurses who come and stay with us. And so these people are educated, and in our experience, they've been an asset, and we've learned a lot from them. And we've been very appreciative of having them in our home. We've only had 3 incidences over many, many years where we had to call Airbnb and say, these people need to go now. And Airbnb has taken care of the problem immediately, like I said. So thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that this will be a financial impact for people like me and my husband who do this to help supplement our income. And I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Colombian. I moved here 27 years ago. I live in
Your name?
Osvaldo Marino. I live in Arlington Way on 981 East. I live in Salt Lake for a couple of years, and I was looking for a place to live because I work for the Air Force at Hill Air Force Base, and I was looking either Bountiful, Centerville, or Farmington, just because it's a nice area. I've been doing Airbnb for a couple of years, and I don't know how many of you guys have traveled around the world. I don't know if you can afford to pay $350 a night for a hotel, but we allow people to stay for us for $40, $50 a night in a nice, beautiful area, clean, safe. I got people from all around the world coming to go to the 5 national parks that we got, work at the airport, work at the refineries, software engineers coming here, a lot of people coming. I got a lady living with me for 5 years because she can't afford to pay hotel or nothing. She can't, so we call her grandma. She wanted to come and talk tonight, but she got sick. As you can see, I got the flu, so she couldn't afford to get a one-bedroom apartment right now. It's like around $1,400, $1,800 if you can find one. She just paid me $350 a month. So what we're doing is providing a place for people that are good people to stay for 1, 2 nights, 5 nights for around $200 or $300 that they would pay for 1 night in a hotel. Also, we're getting to having them stay at the house and then go eat at the restaurant and go to the movies and go to Lagoon and do things around the community that help the community, I don't know if you noticed, but the taxes for hotels, it was 9.5%. It went to 14.7%. That's a lot within a year. My taxes on my house doubled from last year to this year. My wife is staying home right now because we have a 14-month-old baby. I couldn't afford to pay my house if I don't have the Airbnb, even though I work for the Air Force. It will really affect a lot of people. I'm probably one of the youngest here, but I can see people who are elderly. If you take this away from them, what are they going to do? Are you guys going to provide anything for them to help them? We're going through a change in America that is incredible. We're going worse and worse, taxing the people more and more and giving people more laws and rules to stop them from being free. Being free. That's what this is what America is. I'm coming from another country, and I see this here. I travel all around the world, and I stay in Airbnb, and I found Salt Lake, everywhere is Airbnb for 1 or 2 nights. So I don't understand why you want to do it at 30 days, where everywhere else is doing it for 1, 2 nights. It will stop a lot of money from coming into Bountiful, Woodcross, or North Salt Lake, whatever. And the chief is right here. You can ask him if he have a lot of calls about people staying in Airbnb and trouble with, that is costing the city money just because they are called. But if it's just the case, that's why they're here anyway. So I love Bountiful. I love it. You've been mayor, 3 times? 2 twice, but we're going for the 3rd one. So I hope you get it, but I need you guys to help us, I had done a lot of construction on my house, and I have got permits, and the city, they know me very well. I got plenty of parking for my people that come and stay with me. And yeah, they can park on the street. It's nothing illegal to park in the street, but I have them park on my back. I got 5-car garage, and I got plenty of space, like for 10 cars. So it's not like they're parking outside, or I never had any trouble with my neighbors. They like it, they don't, you know, they don't say anything. So I hope you guys reconsider this, because there's a lot of people here that are pretty much upset about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno.
Could I just throw one more little thing out? I just wanted to give.
Quickly, because normally we just do one time, so
Okay, I'll be
please.
so quick. I just wanted to say my current guest and my next one, give an idea of what they do, just to give a flavor for what these people are doing. My current one is, she just got a job. She's from Georgia, moving out. She just needed a place to land while she finds out where she's going to live. And the other one is a traveling nurse, as we've mentioned before. So that's the kind of people that are coming. So thank you.
Thank you. Just before you speak, may I just add that if what you're going to say has already been said, maybe you don't need to come up, but if you want to, you can. But I would just offer that if you're going to say the same exact things, we're getting a pretty good picture of what you're wanting to say to us. So, but I want you to know you're invited to come. Okay, please.
My name is Darlene Thomas. I live at 24 East, 1400 South here in Bountiful. Definitely ditto on everything else that has been said. The reason why, even though I'm chicken about standing up in front of all of you, I decided I wanted to come up. First of all, I wonder if Francisco had a misunderstanding or not about people renting out whole homes, because on Airbnb they call it entire home, even if it's just a basement unit or a accessory dwelling, that you can lock the doors and have it to yourself. And so, just so you know, that doesn't mean it's an entire home. It means that it's, when they call it entire home, it means you have that unit to yourself. I don't know if that's a misunderstanding there or what, but that's the thing. So I've been having an interesting emotion lately, because I love Bountiful. I'm actually from Canada. My husband grew up in Bountiful, and so his family has been here forever. But Bountiful is a wonderful place to raise your family. And I really get from the other side, you know, oh my gosh, you're bringing in all these strangers, and even our own street has several, I'll call them slumlord rentals, you know. We've even had our own experiences with having renters that were hard to get back out. We have in our basement, right now our teenager is living in it, but it's built with a mother-in-law. You know, there's a little kitchenette and a laundry room down there and things, all these extra things that we could close it off and just rent it long-term to somebody else when he moves out. But I really love the idea of having it available for family when family comes in town. And so you do a short-term rental around it. The emotion that I've been having, though, and I'll close with this, is, you know, you get some of these situations where it's people who their home has become too big for their current circumstances, and to afford to stay in it, or, you know, to fill that space, they want to use it as a short-term rental. And to me, this emotion is kind of like, if you get to a stage of your life where you can't afford to keep your home unless you rent part of it out, that seems really unfriendly to suggest that you don't belong in the neighborhood anymore. So I'll leave you guys with those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate being here, and I want to say ditto. That's all.
Thanks, Kevin.
Lynn Jacobs, 46 East, 300 South. I'm actually a member of your planning commission. So wanted to just come up and actually speak to, I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I do want to just talk about our staff, and I know how much work they put into this. Bountiful was a great leader on House Bill, remind me of the number?
82.
82. So many House bills to keep track of, right? From what I've heard, the original House bill was going to be a lot less friendly to what we were wanting to do. And I just want to say kudos to the city for really taking a leadership role and making this as good as it can be. As far as short-term rentals, I can't speak for the other commissioners. My perspective on this, why we included this language as it moved to you, was this idea that in the past, we've been able to notify people about ADUs, and we are losing that ability to notify people. And so I think that's really the crux of all this for my perspective, is this idea that I am so sympathetic to hearing these stories tonight and understanding the impacts of this on families and on people. It's just challenging though, because, you know, if my neighbor all of a sudden starts renting his place out and all of a sudden there's all these cars there and I had no knowledge it was going to happen and no ability to influence it, that feels really hard too, you know? And so I know that's not popular with a lot of the people here tonight, but I've just been thinking about there's got to be a middle ground. There's got to be a way to kind of find a way to have this short-term rental, but also let people know what's going on and let people be able to speak to it. And I think that's really what we were struggling with as a planning commission, is that in the past, we had this conditional use permit, we had a mechanism to notify people, and that mechanism is gone. And that's the challenge for me. So with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got some of the people here together today, so I feel like I got to speak a little bit. My name's Lisa
Good
Fawcett.
for you.
Maybe a compromise will be, since we're the power to let neighbors know ahead of time, if you're doing permits, let's do a permit, and if there's trouble, you get so many warnings, and then your permit is yanked. If you're the kind of host that is allowing people to come to your property and not obeying, being a good citizen, then that power goes away. That's my thought. Thanks.
Thank you.
Somebody's got to be a black sheep.
What?
Okay, so Alex Densley, 443 Jerry Drive. I understand why everybody's back there. I am fully against this in its current setup for multiple reasons. I understand the income side of it. I understand the House Bill 82. I come to these city council meetings more than, well, probably more than most average people that sit here. There's two reasons. There's something I love seeing in this, and I think that it goes back to, I can't remember where he went, planning commission guy? That's what I'm going to call him here for a second. I think that there needs to, where we've got things going on it, it's got some good and it's got some bad on it. Everybody here talks about how they physically live in their home and they have the short-term rental inside of an Airbnb. I really like that aspect of it, that they are physically living there. On the flip side of it, as these homes sell, and as I've had my own conversations with Francisco in his office currently within the last month and a half here, Bountiful City does need some sort of regulation and definition concerning a short-term rental. On my own street, we watched a lovely real estate agent come in, flip a house, change every bedroom so that it can function independent of its own. Every single bedroom now has its own bathroom, its own setup. Came and talked to Francisco. There's absolutely nothing that we can do as a city. It freaking sucks because this real estate agent that has no concern about our community, no concern about our street, has come in and flipped this house and can sell it to whoever to make it whatever. It is fully set up to be an Airbnb and destroy our community. On the flip side of it, I have a little experience of this. My parents have lived here in Bountiful their entire lives. We came here in the early 50s. At the top of my parents' street for the last, I think she's been divorced now about 7 years, 5 to 7 years. There's a wonderful little home up there that used to have a family in it before they were divorced. It was purchased and has been an Airbnb ever since, the whole complete house. You have any idea how many times we've seen the cops come? You have any idea how many times we watch a drunkard pass out in the lawn? Or the skateboard that comes flying down the street and hits my car because it's at the bottom of a circle? There's nothing that my family, nothing that the neighbors, nobody could do anything with it because Bountiful City didn't have anything concerning a short-term rental definition on it. So that's where I agree 100%. I love this idea of, hey, here is a restriction on short-term rentals, and there needs to be something on that because I'm watching it rip apart these communities where We don't have the money to fight the real estate agent that just came in and bought the home for $500,000, dumped $100,000 into it. It's going to make a $200,000 profit selling at $800,000 to then have an investor come in and turn it into a full-time Airbnb. It sucks. But with that being said, I also understand the flip side of it. I don't want to see people leaving their homes because all their kids are gone and the taxes have increased, and I've come and barked at you guys for all the tax increases and all the other things that we've had, including me barking at the school district for their increase too. I would like to see us do something. I don't know if it should all necessarily be included in this one giant thing. I would like to maybe see a compromise on it that, yeah, you can have a short-term rental inside of your home if you are the primary resident in it. I would absolutely like to see something like that. On the flip side, though, I don't want it. I would like to see something on the city code that says, hey, if you are not living in this home, if you are not the primary resident, it's got to be a long-term rental. It can't be this Airbnb where I leave my parents' house at 9:30 at night and, hey, look, there's Bountiful PD sitting right there with a cop car. Or here's 20 cars that have just shown up from all different states and they're partying out, doing whatever and running around. The one at my parents' street is very popular because it's next to a church parking lot that allows lots of property. And it's next to a schoolyard where all the kids, they can send them down and go and play in the schoolyard. It's a very popular thing in a dead-end circle. And it's been not fun for the neighbors or my parents or even myself with my own kids there. So that's my only 2 cents on it, is I think that we've got a pretty good idea of where we want to go with this, but I think it needs just a little bit of tweaking that both sides can be made out to where it's a win for those who live there physically and want to rent it out, but also not turn it into just, hey, investors come in and turn these all into Airbnbs and there's nothing you can do as a community and it ripping you apart. Thank you.
Invite anyone else? For a short, please.
My name is Dustin Seidel, again, 3512 South 100 East. I just wanted to address what his concerns are, as they are a valid concern, especially within the Airbnb community. But there needs to be some distinguished language which concerns commercial entities. And that's what's being a big concern, not only just here locally, but also across Airbnb, across the entire world. So as long as we can define that and come to a middle ground as regard to commercial entities and investments that are coming in and distinguish us as people presented here are completely separate from that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Exceptions become policy, don't they?
West Valley City has been managing their short-term rentals via permit for some time now, very successfully. So there may be a model there that we could follow with permits to address the concern.
Thank you.
that again?
West Valley City.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing, and we will have discussion. Do you want to make any comments,
Yeah.
Francisco, before the council has,
Sure.
I'm sure, several questions?
Sure. Comment I want to make is that the ability that the city provided to its residents to rent a portion of their home started in 2018. That was the big policy discussion. The difficulty is that we didn't at that time or before that address short-term rentals. I believe that based on our policy of not having a policy of short-term rentals, I would think that everyone, and I'm looking at my city attorney over here, anyone that, if you choose to make the change with the proposed change as seen here on the screen and also in the ordinance, if anyone had an approved accessory dwelling unit, they would keep that right of exercising a short-term rental. So what I'm implying here is that this would only affect new internal accessory dwelling units. And let's give our attorney a minute to think about that real quick.
Yeah, that could be true. I'd have to think about that, but I think that's probably correct.
And the reason that I make that is because a year ago, someone could come in, apply, get the CUP, and they could exercise that short-term rental as we had no policy on it. So we would say that it would be treated as a legal non-conforming, meaning that it would be grandfathered in as a property right. But that would only apply if you have an approved internal accessory dwelling unit. If someone is operating without the permit, we wouldn't be able to help them at that stage if this language were to be adopted, or even the alternate language with a sunset clause. On the contrary, council could say, you are the legislator here, and you could say, let's remove the short-term rental provision as currently addressed here in the code. And obviously, we need to have a citywide policy on short-term rentals.
So there's a key distinction on the grandfathering, and that would be that it would have to be you just basically said it, but I'm just going to say it a different way. It would have to be an existing, legally compliant Airbnb
Short-term
ADU,
rental.
short-term rental in order to be legally grandfathered.
Absolutely.
That means inspections, approvals, everything.
Correct. Deed restriction recorded already, permit through my office.
So, in other words, if there were, we've called it a sunset, but it's really a delayed implementation date. If there were a delayed implementation date, that would give people an opportunity to come in and legalize their ADUs and get a permit. Otherwise, there's no record and they would not be grandfathered. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes.
Is the flip side of that also true? There may be people that are here tonight who have fully complied with our ADU ordinance as currently constituted, recorded their deed restrictions, and that if there was a window, then there might be a flood of people who have not gone through that process that would try to achieve that within whatever the time limit was, 30 or 60 days, that have been operating an illegal ADU.
Yeah, that's definitely possible that could happen.
Excuse me.
Yeah, this is a topic that really deserves a little more study. For example, in order to be grandfathered, thinking of our old ADU ordinance, you had to have continually been using that property in that manner. And so you couldn't go through a period where you rented it and then didn't rent it and then rented it again. With a short-term rental, I don't know how you demonstrate that standard. And I hate to not have the answers right now, but these are the kinds of questions that we probably ought to. I would hate to guarantee anybody or have anybody in here leaving tonight saying that the city said that they would be grandfathered. I don't think we can make that determination tonight.
Are we going to need then, council, are we going to need more time? Rather than make a decision tonight, are we going to need to have them put more together for us with these options?
I'd make a motion that we strike the prohibition on short-term rentals and adopt the rest of the ordinance, and then allow ourselves to study that issue further.
You know, I could make this in a substitute motion, but I'd rather discuss it first. I think that what I would say is we either don't adopt the entire ordinance so that it's done cleanly.
So we typically would look for a second and then have discussion, or let it fail and
Well,
then
I'm
have
prepared
discussion?
to make it a substitute motion.
Or make that substitute motion, okay.
I'll make it as a substitute motion that we move on to the next item on the agenda and request that this item be placed on. Does our attorney think that he can have a decision by our November 9th council meeting? Because I'll include that in my motion if so.
Aren't we under some time constraints, Francisco, on adopting this?
Yeah, so we noticed it prior to the the state deadline, which was November 1st. So we were working under a vested, not a vested, but what's the word I'm thinking, Clint? A vested, a pending ordinance. Thank you. We were working under a pending ordinance as we noticed this item prior to the November 1st, October 1st
Yeah, that's
deadline.
what we were thinking, it was
So
October 1st.
we were working on a pending ordinance, and we were going to be just fine. We had we didn't have council 2 weeks ago due to lack of quorum, and then we were able to notice it again in order to have a fully compliant public hearing. So what the state says that if we don't get that taken care of by that October 1st, which we're working with that pending ordinance, the state code would supersede, for lack of a better term, the current code. The short-term rental is a May, so it wouldn't, that is something that we would have to enact positively towards if we wanted to have that or not. So in my interpretation, Clint, we would fall under state code, we would be operating under state code, as we would be in conflict with our current code right now.
I'm going to withdraw my substitute motion, because if that's the answer, then I think that it's incumbent upon us to probably stay here and have that discussion. And I'm
So
not seconding.
it is possible that we could strike the part about prohibiting short-term rentals and pass the rest of it, and then we could revisit that very soon, the concept of short-term rentals.
That is possible.
That is allowed.
And I think that's your current motion.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Not without some further discussion.
Okay. Discussion.
Whatever the concerns or discussion is, we can have those in a very soon work session or whatever.
Oh, no, we're going to have them tonight.
I'm just saying, there may be some answers we don't have tonight,
Oh, sure.
so.
But Francisco has the answers to my questions tonight. So does that motion die then?
Yeah,
for lack
so
of
it's just
second?
going to fail, and it can be remade again, but just fail for the purposes for right now, and now you can move on to discussion.
Super. Mayor, may I?
Please.
Francisco, what is our normal stock of short-term rentals in Bountiful?
Don't have that number.
You have an idea?
No.
Say again? Thank you. Thank you,
Can I just ask
Francisco.
you where you got that number from? Thank you.
Chief Beeler, how many complaints a month do you get from neighbors of short-term rentals? Any idea?
Can you ask him to come to the microphone?
Please. Thanks, Chief.
So if I understand correctly, you were saying that you don't get complaints that there are short-term rentals, but you may be answering calls at short-term rentals.
Correct. I think if we got questions about somebody making complaints about a short-term rental, as a general rule, we would probably defer them to a different office.
Indeed.
Because that's not a legal problem.
Do you keep
for
any
us.
kind of statistics showing what calls are coming in from short-term rentals? Separate?
No.
Identifiable? Sorry to make you have that long walk up here.
That's okay.
Thank you. Francisco? How many calls do you field a month from neighbors complaining about short-term rentals?
I have that. In 2019, I received 3 to 4. In 2020, I didn't receive any. In 2021, I haven't received any.
And that is 0 per month?
Correct.
Or 0 per year?
Per year.
I'm just teasing, it's the same.
Thank you.
So, do short-term rentals require a business license currently, if people are being compliant? Or because the
answer's-
code does not speak on them, do they not require a business license?
Correct.
Can I make a recommendation then? Kendall, can I make your motion?
Go ahead.
Okay, here's what I'd like to do. We have taken a soft touch, we have used a soft touch on short-term rentals thus far, and thus far, in large measure, it has not bitten us. I think that as long as there's not a problem, we shouldn't be looking to preemptively solve the problem, personally. I think that people ought to be able to use their property, exercise their private property. Oh, please don't clap, because literally I could turn around and bite your hand off in a second. Not that I will. Anyway, I don't want to restrict something on the potential that it could be a problem for the city. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the rest of this ADU ordinance, become compliant with the state's horrible HB 82, that we not necessarily schedule it at a fixed date, but that we actively have a discussion again on whether or not we want to speak in the code on short-term rentals, how we want the code to speak on those short-term rentals, and that we establish an official policy if we decide to speak on the short-term rentals that will help folks be compliant and help everybody be above board with what they're doing. That's my motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I have a couple questions. Francisco, if there were an ordinance adopted that had a date, and at such point Bountiful had a full citywide discussion about short-term rentals and ADUs, individual dwellings, could a date then be taken out of this ordinance?
Let me make sure I understand. You're saying something like this, something like the alternate language? With a date, not necessarily January 1st, 2022. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes. As I understand it, I don't serve on the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission is studying the broad issue of short-term rentals in the entire city in standalone dwellings where the entire building is available for a short-term rental. And so at such a time when that ordinance is ready for discussion, if it was deemed that the council wanted to see it applied to ADUs as well as other properties, the date inserted in this ordinance could be removed and.
Yes. Yeah, because it would be a change in the code, in the ordinance, so it would amend whatever it is that could get adopted today. Yes.
What's the timeline for that broader short-term rental discussion and ordinance? It's been on, to the best of my knowledge, two different council retreats as a potential topic, but has not made it yet to this level. So what timeline is that under?
Well, it's not anything that the Planning Commission is currently reviewing. It's more so in lines of the Planning Department. And I think it just went up a notch or two on that priority list.
So what's the realistic timeline?
I would say 6 months.
You know, I have some concern. As most of the council knows, the audience may not know, I spent quite a bit of time this last session on the small work group that the League of Cities and Towns put together on HB 82, dealing with the broad frustrations that cities had with HB 82. As the audience is aware, as the council is aware from the history that Francisco provided, Bountiful had a really great ADU ordinance that we spent a lot of time a year ago discussing. And it included the ability to provide notice to neighbors. It included the ability for there to be a process where an applicant could feel heard, neighbors could feel heard. You know, we had some limitations on sizes, but otherwise we had a very broad ordinance where this wasn't an issue. Greatly frustrated that a legislator from our jurisdiction failed to recognize how great our ordinance was and decided to apply a one-size-fits-all policy to the entire state. Not recognizing that Bountiful is not St. George, and it's not Woodruff, and it's not Richfield, and it's not Moab. We're not a college town. We're not a resort destination. We're none of those things. And so they left us with a very interesting ordinance, and I spent a significant amount of time negotiating what were very few concessions that the legislature were willing to give us in some of those tools. And so the fact that we are at least 6 months away from a broader short-term rental policy is concerning to me. ADUs are as close as the legislature can make them to duplexes without putting their foot over the line, but they're standing right next to the line. And part of the ways in which they have stood right next to the line is removing that conditional use permit requirement and that ability for that notice and discussion among neighborhoods. I don't think that the people who bought into, and we had large crowds here that came for our ordinance a year ago, you know, we left feeling like we'd reached something that worked for Bountiful, and now we've lost that. We don't have something that works for all of Bountiful, thanks to the legislature. And so I have concerns. I don't necessarily love the things we're being forced to accept. I think the tools that were left to us are tools we ought to seriously consider.
May I respond? First of all, I want to thank Councilmember Bradshaw for doing a lot of heavy lifting during that session. I couldn't agree more with virtually everything you said. What I don't agree necessarily with is preemptively solving a problem by restricting property rights that we might be able to solve administratively otherwise. And if this becomes the horror that some worry it could become, we can certainly fast track a remedy from the Planning Commission and get it passed in the council and end these on the day of the vote. But I think that the state has taken away our ability to do that kind of control with all of our ADUs. But what we could exercise is some control on those ADUs that are going to be used as businesses like short-term rentals. It's completely acceptable for a city to license or permit short-term rentals, and I think that that is a control mechanism that maybe would be preferable, to me today, to notify neighbors, to get input, to get feedback, and to make sure that people are more comfortable with the properties next door being used as a short-term rental. I agree the controls that the state left us on ADUs in general are almost nil, and I want to keep that control, that prohibition in our back pocket in case. With the discussion tonight, I just don't feel like I want to preemptively solve that problem before it becomes a problem.
And I guess I would reply back to my dear friend on the other side of the dais. We don't have a robust code enforcement division. We don't. We know we don't because we filled the complaints. With all due respect to Francisco and his ability to be a one-man band, especially right now, we don't have robust code enforcement.
True.
I think we've probably heard from some tonight that may have completed the entire process to be deed restricted, but some that may not have. And we don't have a robust code enforcement program to go check on that.
That's a great point.
Let alone the problems that may come from short-term rentals. I guess I'll chime in if you both have gone to your separate corners. The great
Does it
part is
feel
that
like-
we actually do occupy
I
separate
know.
corners on this
There's
dais.
nothing contentious
Does it
about
feel like there's a chasm between us?
No,
Okay.
not at all. I have been going back and forth on this with the question of whether or not to strike the 30-day limit. I live in a neighborhood that had one basement Airbnb that was quite a headache for the neighborhood, and the police were called pretty regularly. And maybe the police didn't know, as the chief said, didn't know that it was, that there's no way for them to know whether or not it was an Airbnb. And then there are people like you who are responsible, I don't know, hosts is the term I'm looking for the people who are renting out your basements, and as short-term rentals. I definitely don't want to do anything that would feel like we are imposing or restricting property owners' rights. However, the city does have zones for certain reasons. We have our commercial zone, we have our housing zone, we have, place where restaurants are. There's a reason why my husband can't treat patients in our home. There's a reason why we used to have a gentleman down the street who is a mechanic, and he used to work out of his home, out of his garage. Someone called, and he now had to relocate his business somewhere else and secure a place where he had to pay rent, whereas before he was doing it out of his home. He had to make those adjustments. So it's very much a fine line, and I recognize that. But, and as my colleagues, council members Higginson and Bradshaw have indicated, it is frustrating that the state has removed that check where neighbors had to be notified. Because that was something that I felt was a really good part of our city ordinance. So I'm a little bit frustrated that this decision has to be made so soon. I thought we had more time as well. So am I understanding correctly? We have to make a decision by November 1st, whether it's to strike the 30-day restriction. If we do choose to do that, we can revisit it again when we have a more robust discussion, or we could leave it as is and then again do the reverse. We could remove it when we have a more robust discussion. Is that correct?
No, not entirely.
Okay.
I apologize. It's not a November 1st deadline. It was an October 1st deadline, but we were working.
We're already past it.
We were working under a pending ordinance that was set up prior to that. So we need to move forward as soon as possible. Otherwise, we simply default back to state code.
So if we default back to state code, can we remove that language in 6 months?
Sure. I don't know if we would recommend that because we would have our codes be in conflict with the state code as of right now.
So if the only way to change it is to strike the language now and then put it back on, potentially?
That is a possibility.
But we can't do the reverse.
No, right, we wouldn't be able to, I don't know what you mean by reverse.
You can adopt an ordinance with provisions that address short-term rentals. You can adopt an ordinance that addresses them but puts a delay date, an effective date at a later point on there, and you can go back and change those at any time, even before it becomes effective, or you can do the opposite.
So either option's
Yeah, you can
on
do
the
it.
table.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Because to Richard's point, I mean, you don't necessarily want to preemptively strike something. However,
the people who have spoken to me mostly about this are people who already see it as a problem.
And that's and honestly, if someone were to look at the agenda, they would not know that short-term rentals were going to be discussed here without looking into the packet.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
to get a more robust discussion, we would want it to be published a little bit differently.
And that's what I would be comfortable with.
If I could add.
Okay, but go ahead.
I just wanted to add that currently, it's a permitted use, and we would then have to pick whether we move forward with a permit or a business license. If we take no action, I don't receive an application, it's just a permitted use. How would that property owner move forward with that deed restriction? That's part of HB 82, that it kind of has to provide a mechanism for us to give to someone, here's your deed restriction, go get it recorded at the county. Because that was the permit or the business license was set up as an optional component, not as a requirement.
That's why I like moving ahead with the ordinance, but just striking the part about a 30-day, prohibiting short-term rentals, because that's something we can discuss soon, but the rest of the ordinance would be helpful to have in place.
If I may ask, Councilwoman Harris, since you sit on the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission unanimously voted to strike to keep the 30-day language, correct? To have that restriction. So if the entire Planning Commission, including yourself, voted to keep that,
so
what was that reason? What was the Planning Commission's reasoning to keep it as is? Help me understand their reasoning behind that, if we're missing something that Planning Commission.
Sure. So I think that for me, I can speak for myself. When the Planning Commission looked at this, the short-term aspect wasn't a part of the discussion. And since that time, I have heard from more people and gotten more information. And so for me, that's why I'd like to, but it's an important ordinance that keeps us in compliance with state law. But this one little aspect of it, we did not even discuss in Planning Commission when we met. So
Was this same presentation given during Planning Commission?
Yes.
It was, so it was discussed.
I do recollect that we did discuss it, and it was the same principles that outlined in the presentation. It was to keep the theme of the purpose of offering a long-term rental of 30 consecutive days. And it was also the other concern that I shared tonight, which is the state took away my public hearing ability. So it was a way to keep the theme of the purpose and at the same time mitigate the impacts that now we don't let anybody know of that internal accessory dwelling unit.
And when I say it wasn't discussed, what I mean is there was no public hearing. It wasn't a discussion that we went into a lot of detail about the short-term aspect.
Would you like to make a, since we have you from
Can I interject really quick?
Yes.
And I'm gonna strongly suggest
Yeah, we have a legislative-
that our planning commissioner not comment here.
Okay, thank you.
And it has nothing to do with him. He's an excellent planning commissioner.
Thank you.
Wonderful planning commissioner, but it goes beyond the scope of his role as a planning commission member.
Okay.
And it also, it puts him at risk. So
Okay.
I'm going to recommend that he not do that. Now, Councilmember Harris is in a different position. She's a member of the council as well. What I want to avoid is there was a lot of discussion and things that happened in that meeting. That meeting is over. He doesn't represent the planning commission. And so I would suggest that we not hear from him anymore.
Okay, but what we do have is we have a motion and we have a second. And we have to, we can have more discussion if we want to, but we need to act on the motion and the second.
Mayor, could we have the motion restated, please?
I'd like to withdraw the motion. I don't know. It's really frustrating me then to read back again that there was a public hearing held, although no one made a comment, and that the entire planning commission voted to pass this on with the restriction. That's frustrating. Then we have alternate positions tonight. So I withdraw the motion. Wait for another one.
And we're good? To withdraw the motion here?
Yes.
Okay. Is there another motion that would,
Just in point of, just a question for the council. Are there other things about this ordinance besides the short-term rental portion that you have concerns about?
Well, our hands are tied because it's all mandated by the state. The only thing we are able to have an opinion on per the state is the 30-day restriction. Am I correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there is one other area where we have flexibility, that's the business license or the
Oh,
permit.
business license.
Sure.
But
And whether we put a lien on it or not, or a notice, or,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm just wondering if the rest of the council isn't opposed to, I mean, you know, like you said, Millie, it's out of our hands. We need to be compliant with state law. So because of that, I'm wondering if you are all, if there's an appetite for the council to go ahead in order to be compliant and what do you see as the drawback of waiting to discuss the short-term rental?
Control. Control is the answer to that. And I don't mean control because we want to irrationally control people's private property, but we want to be able to control the impact on neighbors' private property too. It's one of our most important roles as government is to make sure that property owners are not doing things on their property that are negatively impacting their neighbor's property.
So right now,
No control right now.
so that makes perfect sense. I respect that. So right now, we don't allow or prohibit short-term rentals. And so if we continue that course for the next few months while we research this and discuss it, do you agree? What's your appetite, council, for taking that course?
So the part of the problem is if we didn't adopt anything tonight is, Francisco has some record keeping that currently exists of people that were in compliant with our 2018 ordinance and our 2020 ordinance. If we didn't adopt anything tonight, as I understand it from our city attorney and our planner, we fall out of compliance with state code and there becomes no record keeping because there would be no recording of a deed restriction, no lien, no permit, and no business license, because those are all mays rather than shalls within the state code. So the universe of people who have an ADU that we might not know about between now and indefinite discussion date could grow by whatever amount as long as that door stays open.
So maybe we extend the date in the sunset clause?
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable.
That's the option.
I think that's
I'm
the
more
only
comfortable with
option.
the date, which is
So
why I
keep the 30-day
suggested the date.
restriction, but extend the date in the sunset clause so we can have a bigger discussion at a later time?
May I?
Yes, please.
With a provision that in the meantime, and I know, Francisco, I'm sorry, I know you're overloaded, but we sincerely have to have the discussion through our planning commission and back here to be able to see if we can protect neighbors while allowing people to do this with their property. I have no interest in taking away people's property rights on a potential problem. What I do have is interest in putting a mechanism in place that allows neighbors to be protected through permitting or licensing and tracking of those things. So, yeah, February 1st, can we do it by then?
The answer is yes, provided we recognize there are other things that won't get done.
I know.
And, which is okay. We just have to know that we'll have to say no to some
Francisco
other
said
things.
6 months.
And I think 6 months by the time you're talking about running it through the planning commission and then running it back through the city council, you were talking about a decision in 6 months.
Yes.
April 1st.
And obviously, you're catching me on the spot, so
Sure.
it's the best estimate I can give you.
You can overpromise, right?
May I make a personal request for pushing it to potentially March 1st? since I will be otherwise occupied with an infant the end of January, the beginning of February, and I definitely would like to be a part of this discussion, unless you want me to bring the baby to the meeting.
We're counting on you bringing the baby, but March 1st is okay with me.
But
Would the council be comfortable if, if we were to say that we were to bring back a discussion to you by March 1st, and that it would be really April 1st that the ordinance would be enacted? In other words, it would give us between now and March 1st to run it through the Planning Commission. If we can beat that, great. And if that's not okay, that's also fine. We will work this out, but I'm just thinking there's going to be some robust discussion at the Planning Commission as well, and but so that's one option. Long story short, tell us a date and we'll figure it out.
Good clarifying question. Are you thinking that it will take till April 1st for a full short-term rental in ADUs and in other properties? Or are we asking the Planning Commission to only consider it for ADUs?
To me, it doesn't make any sense to have the conversation without the entire
Yeah, that's a great question.
entire
Okay.
discussion. So I was assuming, and I think Francisco
I
was
was too.
assuming, it was
It-
the full meal deal. This would be-
Full-blown short-term rental discussion.
Yeah.
Can I offer maybe a different way of looking at this from a timing standpoint? You're going to amend the ordinance no matter, in the end, you're going to amend the ordinance one way or another. So maybe rather than putting a time constraint on there like January, February, March, April, you put it further out like June or something like that, because when it gets amended, then
It'll go
then
back.
you change it to whatever it's going to be. Does that make sense? So in other words, you get done in March, but it says June 1st, well, you're amending the ordinance anyway. And so the ordinance then says what you want it to say.
So devil's advocate, playing Richard's role in tonight's theater, that would mean that those people
It
out
potentially puts them in a tough position.
Yeah, they are, instead of looking at a moratorium of 6 months before this decision can be revisited, they'd be looking at much longer.
Oh, I don't think it puts them in a moratorium at all. It gives them the green light to keep
exactly.
operating.
Mm-hmm.
to keep operating.
Keep operating.
But they don't know that they can accept, I mean, they're.
Can't accept
they're in-
beyond,
they're in
say,
limbo.
June 1st.
So you're
If
giving
you
them
were
a
to
little
use
more
that
time.
date.
But there is the potential of grandfathering existing
Correct.
units
Which you
in
could
once we have
codify
this
as
bigger
part of the
discussion.
ordinance. Yes.
Is this making sense to everybody? Okay.
It's making sense to me.
So Clint, am I reading this different than you are? Because it says effective January 1, now you could insert March 1, May 1, June 1.
Whatever you want, yeah.
Short-term rentals of 30 days or less are prohibited.
Yes. So if you're saying effective January, let's say you're saying June 1st, that means all the way up till June 1st,
They're allowed.
you got the green light.
Knowing that we'll have the discussion.
And these same
we'll
people,
have the
these same
discussion.
people are going to be in the meeting in March when they hear the deliberation and are either going to start recognizing that it looks like the council's going to pass an ordinance that's going to allow them to continue, or that it's going to be wrapping up June 1st or so on.
Yeah. One comment to you folks that are here tonight. You presented your cases nicely, and you were nice, and nobody yelled. That was awesome. So, seriously, we do better when you're here coaching us, and that doesn't mean that you're going to get all that you hoped for, but it might. But thanks for everybody being civil and pleasant tonight. That's good work.
Thank
And
you.
may I, I'm sorry,
No,
excuse
go
me,
ahead.
Mayor.
Nope. Go ahead.
I really did, was it Fawcett? Ms. Fawcett? Her suggestion of permits, if that's a possibility to keep those offenses, a record of those offenses, and then potentially renege a permit if it came down to that. I would really like to explore that, because I think that could be a really good, as she said, middle ground solution, so.
Are we allowed to revoke a permit under HB 82? We can
Oh.
issue fines and corrective action requirements, but I don't believe we can revoke the permit if it becomes a permitted use.
Again, I think we can for the short-term rental, but not for the ADU. The ADU is allowed. I mean, we can't do anything about that.
We could,
The issue is the licensed short-term rental commercial use of that ADU. So kind of two separate things.
Okay, so you're proposing then if somebody is using their ADU for a long-term rental, they have a permit. If they're
Absolutely.
using their ADU for a short-term rental, they have a permit and a business license?
Yeah. That's what I'm proposing. Sorry if that wasn't clear earlier. But with the two different uses, the different treatment is, I think, appropriate and needed. So while we still try to preserve as much of everybody's private property rights to do what they want to do as we can. So,
I think it's an intriguing idea, the dual depending on usage. I'm more comfortable with an April 1 date at the farthest end, in part because we've been saying we were going to have a short-term rental ordinance for at least the last 2 years.
as much as I love Francisco, I like the shorter timeline as well, and I'm happy to support a April 1 deadline.
Is that a motion?
No, because this is Kate's issue. I'm on the other side.
I would only make a motion if you were going to second it.
My gosh.
Done.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that, first of all, I want to make an amendment. Do you want me to make the amendment, or you want to make it all in one motion to the date?
no,
Yeah, just do it in the motion.
Yeah, just do it in the motion.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve ordinance 2021-10, amending Bountiful City's land use code related to accessory dwelling units in section 6. I'd like to adopt this language that Francisco is showing with a change of April 1st, 2022 as the effective date.
Okay. Do I have a second?
And I'd like to second that motion after I say to all those folks out there who may still not be fully official on their short-term rentals, these city staff folks up here do way more than they get paid for. They are short-staffed, and they do a lot, and they're your friends. So between now and when that date comes, in case it needs to be grandfathered, I'd sure suggest that everybody get square. And I'm happy to second Councilmember Bradshaw's.
May I ask one clarifying question?
Sure.
Do we need to indicate in the motion the plan for an
Thank
upcoming
you.
discussion?
Thank you.
To put that on, just to have that on public record, that
I
that
would
is,
be happy to request that the Planning Commission commence a process to study short-term rentals broadly as an amended part of my amended motion.
thank you.
Would you be willing to amend it even further?
Why
To
not?
the point that
I think you can quadruple amend.
we conclude that discussion before the drop-dead date of the prohibition.
Yes, I'm happy to consider that a friendly amendment, that the broad discussion of short-term rentals in the city of Bountiful be concluded by the Planning Commission before we meet the April 1st effective date.
Second. And sorry for the torturous route that it took.
Now, just so I'm clear, you don't really want the planning commission to be done by April 1st. You want the city council to make a decision by April 1st.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay?
so
So
that's hard.
that's,
our
no,
Planning
that's
Commission
okay.
member should
That's just
clear
loud and
his-
clear to me
his
that
March schedule.
it's not the planning commission that I don't know that you need to make part of your motion, but we're loud and clear. We need to get this in front of the city through the planning commission, in front of the city council, so you have time to consider it and make a decision by April 1st.
Indeed.
And then we'll buy Francisco a puppy.
I don't know that he wants to puppy.
We can have a
A
vacation,
therapy dog.
a vacation in a short-term rental in a different community.
So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah. Further discussion. You know what? I think you guys are probably like me, and when I say guys, I mean everybody. We use these things when we go other places, and we're not dirtbags. So come on.
No, of course.
Let's have a favorable attitude towards these same things that we use. Rah, rah. Okay.
100.
Any further discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Whatever we passed, we passed. Chief, the one thing I would say is maybe between now and then, is there a way of maybe without too much difficulty finding out if any of, keeping any data on short-term rental police actions?
It's already ready.
Is that? Maybe Francisco, between Francisco, I don't know if it's possible, but could you check it out? Thank you.
It's possible.
Okay, next item.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Seeing that all the appropriate authorities have signed off on the idea of the the easement release at 114 South Bountiful Boulevard, I'd make a motion that we grant that release of easement as Mr. Cheney has recommended.
Second?
That's second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That was,
Thank you.
that was item number 10 on the agenda.
Right?
And it was very merciful.
Gary Hill?
This is the formalization of the authorization the council already gave to share $160,000 in ARPA funds with South Davis Sewer District. This is an interlocal agreement that clarifies their responsibilities for reporting as well as ours, and we'd look for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Do we give them the money even if they don't receive the state ARPA grant?
I believe the amount is contingent upon their receiving the grant.
So I
Second.
have a motion. Do I have a second?
Okay. Second.
Kate,
Kate,
second.
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 12, Alan Johnson.
Yes, Mayor and Council, it's great to be here tonight with, and I do have the three items here. The first item is the discussion that we had 2 weeks ago at the work session, which has gone through the Power Commission and through the work session. And we have made no changes since the work sessions, and I'd be glad to go through it in any detail you want, or if you want to move forward as the same thing as we did as we talked in the work session, like I said, but how deep would you like me to go through it?
Without changes.
Yeah, there's no changes.
Richard?
Yeah, this is, I apologize that I was not well last month, or last meeting. I apologize that we didn't have a quorum. This is unchanged. The rate is derived from the rate that we're paying for our solar contracts plus transmission costs. It's fair to the folks generating, and it's fair to the folks that don't generate, and it's fair to Bountiful Power. I'd recommend it. And I'd like to make a motion that we approve it.
Can I just ask, so this is focusing on new solar customers?
Yes, I will point out, our current 240-ish customers will be no change. There's nothing to them at all.
So if they want, they can ask to change to this?
Yeah, we currently have two classes. We have, I'll call our net metering now, that basically their excess power, we're paying them 8 cents. That will go unchanged. There are the feed-in tariff that would go no change, but if they wanted to change, they could do the wiring and the city would provide all that, and then they would come on the new rate, which is essentially be paying them the 5 cents for their excess power. But that would be their choice. They could stay on it or move if they wanted. And then we had the June.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then we had the June 20, my mind's gone blank on the date here, when we were going to bring together in 8 years, and June 23rd, July of 2030, when we got through the budget year, when the two would come together at that point, so,
Thank you for your work on this.
all righty.
So we have a motion and a second.
And Mayor, if I could say
Please.
one more thing. The opportunity for the feed-in tariff customers to now make the changeover to net metering is positive for just about everybody that's spoken on the subject, and allows them, again, as we were hoping, to use their own power first before they send power onto the city to be sold.
Sorry, could
So-
you explain that one more time?
And no.
please?
Absolutely not. So the folks that are on feed-in tariff right now, the city requires them to sell all of their power to the city and then buy all of their power back from the city with a credit given for what they've generated. And that, as often happens with government, the pendulum swung from the net metering side, which was too favorable for the generators, to the protection of our other customers, which was not favorable for the generators. And this is a great balance where we're reimbursing for an appropriate amount, the same amount that we get solar for from other sources. Folks can now use their own power first. We don't force them to sell it all. They can use it and sell the excess back. Have I explained that okay?
You
Alan?
did very well, and I apologize. I probably should have took a minute longer.
No, you
around
shouldn't.
through it.
He's
It's
my
us.
interpreter on most things.
So that's, it accomplishes everything that almost everyone that has talked to us since feed-in tariff went into effect has asked us to fix. So,
And appropriately, we did it correctly to begin with.
Indeed.
And it's, it has come down to where we are now, which is, again, very appropriate.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item.
The next item I have is our Echo Hydroelectric project. As you know, we've been spending a fair amount of money rebuilding it because the wheels they're 30 years old and they were cracked and needed to be worked on. There are what they call thrust bearings. These are bearings when the water pushes against the bearings that's spinning, it holds the pressure from pushing it away. Our bearings that we've had on there have operated within the operating range, but they've always operated in the upper 75% of their normal operating range. Well, what happened is we redid the wheels, the geometry's changed just a little bit, and it's putting an additional pressure back on these thrust bearings. And what we're doing now is we're finding that the bearings are now running into the alarm point or into the failure motion. There was pictures in there where the original ones have got some little round circles. And we have found a company, and it's the only one we've been able to find, and it's one that Logan City had the same problem when they redid their hydro, and they was able to stop it. By putting these little bit bigger thrust bearings out of a different material, which has less heat into it, it allows the bearings to run cooler and will operate back on. And so we were not able to find anybody else, or the only people that are doing it. They have done it all over the country, but as you get into hydros, they're getting less and less companies that do this big type work, so there's just not a lot of them out there. But it'd be the Power Commission and staff's recommendation that we approve the quote from Integrated Power Services to remanufacture our thrust bearings for the 3 turbines for the total of $261,868. And that's not only the machine work, but that's for them to actually tear it back apart, and then put the bearings back into it. So it's the labor and everything's included in that. So that would be the Power Commission, the staff's recommendation.
Any discussion? If not, I'll look for a motion.
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. A second?
Second?
Okay, Kendall in with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hey, just one second. So the more water in the dam, the more power we get, the more thrust there is on.
That is correct.
That is correct. So when it's lower, you get less, right? But does that also affect the bearings?
It does.
Is it better when it's high?
Well, the higher it actually puts more pressure on that bearing. So as the dam is full, there's head pressure or water pressure against it that pushes against it in more. So
Okay.
as the water level comes down, we get less power produced because it can spin less for the same amount of water, but also puts less energy back against the thrust bearing.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, next item.
The next one I have is, I've called it the warranty issue. This is our resolution 2021-19. And this was the mutual aid agreement that Councilman Hidson talked about at the beginning of the meeting. We were able to get to the point and we approved this, but it's because they was moving so fluid from the time we got the contract, they made some changes to it. The mayor was able to go there, but we're now basically going back and getting permission for him to sign it. A couple of things that gave us trouble because they changed is they put a lot of changes in the definition from our contract, which was good. They're all just very explanatory. Wasn't a problem. They changed Article 1 on how the requesting party would get in contact with assisting party via cell phone, emails, the different ways. Again, it wasn't a big issue, but it was just another change in the contract. The other one of the big changes, which isn't a big issue, is instead of the original one, it would said that they would not charge for equipment, labor, or equipment costs. And then it came back and changed it, that you can now charge for equipment when you're doing mutual aid. You just need to give them what your rates are when you do that. The other big issue was they've included an insurance provision of the $3 million, and that took a little bit of hubbub of what it is, which also included the government immunity that was included in the $3 million that we had. So those were the major changes in the contract. We still believe it is a great concept. It's the mutual aid of working back and forth through the REAs and through the investor-owned and the municipalities. And most of the municipalities, we have mutual aid, but this opens it up to a bigger organization. So the Power Commission staff still think it's politically a great move. It's still a great move for operations, and we would support giving the mayor the authorization to sign that mutual aid agreement.
Thank you.
Alan, I have a question. On the third issue, the contract change, providing the equipment at no charge to including the charges at your rates, which side of the mutual aid agreement did that request come from?
You know, I am not sure. I believe it came from the investor-owned, because our current one that we have through the REAs and the municipalities, we do not charge for equipment. So I believe it came from the REA, the investor-owned, but I'm not 100% sure. I just know it showed up.
Thank you.
I'd like to move that we approve Resolution 2021-19, adopting the One Utah Mutual Assistance Agreement.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank
As
you very
always,
much.
thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you.
And Mr. Drake.
This is oh, I forgot I turned my mic off. This is an agreement for a mutual aid agreement with other cities in the county as well as the county. We all have the same requirements for stormwater, and this just allows us to combine forces and be more efficient. It's the same agreement, virtually the same agreement that we've signed before, and unless you have further questions, I'll just submit it as that.
Thank you. If there are no questions, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve interlocal agreement 2021-2022 with Davis County and Davis County cities.
Thank you, Kate. And second? Is that you, Chris? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then I'll look for a motion to adjourn to a closed session.
Mr. Mayor, motion that we adjourn to a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, reasonable imminent litigation, and/or to discuss the character and/or competency of an individual.
That's a roll call vote. I've got my randomizers here.
Oh, my gosh.
Got to wake up here. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Higginson.
Aye.
Councilmember Barr.
Aye.
Member Bradshaw.
Aye.
Councilmember Simonson.
Aye.
Did we state the location? If we didn't, the location is in the council conference room.
Oh, before we go there,
Okay.
can I just thank Clint for his skill and knowledge in helping to keep us and our commissioners out of trouble.
Oh, he does a good job.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Clint.
Hey, thanks for
Welcome.
everyone being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.